are somewhat in playoff mode. The play-in tournament is here. 2 play-in games last night in the NBA, their inaugural play-in tournament. And they were both very interesting games. But we'll get into all that on the NBA Exchange. The Boston Celtics, well, they're back in the playoffs, and that comes courtesy of their win in the play-in tournament last night, a 118-100 victory over the Washington Wizards. How'd they get there? Well, it was behind Jayson Tatum, who was absolutely putting in that work. The Celtics forward went off for a 50-piece, 50 points to go along with 8 rebounds, 4 assists, and a steal to go along with 2 blocks as well. Tatum scored 23 of his 50 points in the third quarter. And to put things in perspective, the Wizards had 26 points in the third quarter. Tatum's performance moves Boston into a first-round matchup with the Brooklyn Nets on Saturday. Even after Tatum's performance, some are still wondering if he has reached superstar status.
I don't really get caught up in, those who think I am a superstar and those that don't. What does that really mean? I know that my teammates, I've earned their respect. I've earned the respect of the guys that I play against and the coaches. And, I believe myself, and that's all that matters.
I don't know how everyone feels about Jayson Tatum, whether he's a superstar or not. I'm not even sure that really matters. All that matters is you got to take a look at some of his recent play. He's had some incredible offensive performances in the last few weeks. Check this. He has hit 50 points 3 times in the last 6 weeks. Now, the Celtics haven't always played that well, but this has come in games that really matter, where they need him to step up. He's had big performances, like here in the play-in tournament without Jaylen Brown. The Celtics have had a lot of injuries throughout the season. And what's more important with this guy, too, we cannot forget this. We cannot lose sight of this. He's doing this after a bout with COVID. This is a player who's talked about having to use an inhaler before games just to be able to play. And he's still putting up these offensive numbers. It's just a tremendous accomplishment. He's an elite scorer. And right now, no matter what you think about Jayson Tatum, superstar or not, you can at least appreciate that he's putting in the work every time he steps on that court. Now, in the other playing matchup on Tuesday night, the Indiana Pacers looked like they got their act together at least for one night. At least for one night, it looks like they did. They had it all rolling against the Charlotte Hornets at home, and they came out with the right intensity in this contest. The Hornets, on the other hand, they kind of looked like a team that forgot they were playing in an elimination game. Looks like it was 1-2-3 Cancun for the Hornets. Everyone had it going for the Pacers, who shot 55% from the field and just under 46% from downtown. Indiana had 7 players in double figures, led by O'Shea Brissett's 23 points. Brissett wasn't even on an NBA team in March. And with the victory, the Pacers will move on and play the Wizards for the 8th seed on Thursday. Now tonight, we'll get to see the Western Conference in action in the play-in tournament. And there's some interesting matchups, particularly the late game, which everyone, at least if you're on the West Coast, will definitely be watching. But the first matchup of the night, we'll have the San Antonio Spurs. They are the 10th seed going against the 9th-seeded Memphis Grizzlies. And this should be a very interesting one. 2 teams that I think are very closely matched. Ja Morant, obviously looking to impress again on the big stage here in the play-in. Lost on Sunday to the Warriors with Steph Curry. It wasn't able to secure that 8th seed, but it's going to be interesting to see if the Grizzlies will come out hungry. But here's the thing. I would not discount the Spurs in this one. Very proud team, very young team, but they're still led by their star, DeMar DeRozan, who's going to want to at least try to make one last stand with the Spurs on this play-in tournament stage. I think this is going to be a very entertaining game that I think many people may actually sleep on. And I just wouldn't sleep on the Spurs here. I like the Spurs here. I think the Spurs are going to find a way to get this done. I'll never count out a Greg Popovich coach team here. So watch out for the Spurs in this 10-9 matchup. Now, second matchup of the night, that's going to be the Golden State Warriors with Steph Curry, who's been really hot from downtown, especially over the last couple of weeks, against King James and the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, look, there's a lot of pressure on the Lakers here. You think a lot of people say they have to get this game. They've got to win. They don't want to play any more games in the play-in tournament than they have to. LeBron James thinks the play-in tournament is a stupid idea, but here he is playing in it. And you look, he's going to play hard, no doubt. And I think the Lakers win this one. I just think they're too good defensively. And although Curry will get his points, would not shock me at all whatsoever if he gets his points. I just think the Lakers are going to be too good in this matchup, and they want to be able to get a little bit of rest, not as much as they've liked, before they have to play this weekend in the playoffs, if they can get there. But look, it's all on King James and the Lakers. They've got to get there and take business tonight at home, 10 o'clock Eastern start against the Golden State Warriors. It's Wednesday, so you know what time it is. NBA with Nuance. That means my man Gerard Hector will be joining me, and he is here. Gerard, another week, another NBA with Nuance. Unless I don't know, do you have some hot takes this week?
Nah,
you got some hot
Playboy.
takes you want to share with me?
Nah, Playboy. No hot takes. We don't do that here. We save that for the other shows, man. We try to give y'all some nuance. Look, I get it. Hot takes are fun. People like to wild out and yell and stare at angry clouds and shake their fists. Like me, I like to go, all right, I believe something, but let me see what actually is true.
Yeah, let's see what's true. That is what we do here. You know what else is fun? NBA playoffs. And the play-in, which is going on right now, they are upon us. But when it comes, Gerard, to looking at the playoffs, when we're all sitting down to make predictions, give our thoughts on what we think may or may not happen, a lot of times people look back and say, hey, this is what happened in the regular season. This team beat this team 3 out of 4 matchups. This team split here. This team looked really good offensively. It looked really good defensively. So I think when it comes to that, right, we look at statistics a lot and we look at these regular season numbers and just how measurable they are. How important is it looking at regular season numbers in terms of determining what will happen in the postseason?
Dexter, it's so interesting. It's a fascinating question. And it's it's a little bit of both in the sense that it means some things, but it also means nothing, right? And the main reason why is because the regular season and the postseason are not the same thing. Yes, they are both academically basketball in that teams have a round ball and they put it in a round hoop. But the way the game is played, regular season versus postseason, completely different, right? You playing 4 games in 5 nights, 5 games in 7 nights, as we had this season because of the compressed schedule, you ain't doing no scouting. Like, if you, and we've been fortunate, we cover the NBA and cover teams, we've been in locker rooms. You see a scouting report during a regular season game. It's a 1 sheet of paper. It's got bullet points on it. You ever see a scouting report for the playoffs? It's a binder, okay, for each player. And the difference there is that you've got the time. Now we're playing the same team. We're going over and over and over, and we're looking deep into what's your primary, what's your secondary, what's your tertiary actions. Okay, great. We're going to force you into that 4th action. How you like that now? What's your 5th action? Do you even have a 5th action, right? And that's why it's so much harder. And the other point of that being, in the postseason, you don't get to play Cleveland, Orlando, Sacramento, Houston, Minnesota, all those terrible teams. Every team you play is good now. So it changes, which is why for me, when I look at stats, one of the big things I look at is estimated plus minus, adjusted net rating, adjusted defensive and adjusted offensive rating. And it's adjusted because they take into account whom your opponents are when you play. Now, so that way it says, okay, if you're playing a bad team, we're not going to credit you that much. If you play a good team, we'll credit you for that. And it's still a large enough sample size, right? 72 games can still tell me something about a player and a team.
Yeah, it absolutely can. Last season, let's just take that before we got into the bubble playoffs, we saw, the Bucks, great offensive team the previous 2 seasons. The Dallas Mavericks last year was supposedly the greatest team and offensive team in NBA history, right? And then sometimes everybody touts that as why they can be dangerous in the playoffs or why they should have a deep run. But we've seen that not happen. We've seen this not to be true in recent playoff history. When you see stuff like that, do you think that tells you or do you think people will start saying, hey, we have to look deeper at these numbers and have more adjusted stats instead of just looking at offensive rating, defensive rating? Is this more important that we look at the adjusted stats at this time?
Yeah, for sure. And we need to give the stats context, right? Like one of the stats I like looking at for individual play is effective field goal percentage and true shooting percentage, right? Efficiency. Why does efficiency matter? Because if you can score a lot of points on fewer shots, that's a good thing. Why does that matter? In the playoffs, you have limited possessions, right? You ain't gonna have the opportunity to, get your, as many possessions as you do in the regular season. So if I can be effective with less possessions, that's a good thing. And now remember, every player, Dexter, in the postseason, in the history of the NBA, with the exception of like 2 people, they get worse shooting wise in the playoffs. And it's because of what I mentioned before, because you're not playing bad teams, you're playing good teams. So everybody's numbers are going to drop slightly because some people drop more than others, but you're going to go down because it's elite defense is geared to stop you. but I want someone who starts from a high efficiency, high shooting percentage so that I have variance within that drop. If you're someone on the border who's already like a gunner, that makes it more challenging come postseason.
So I was looking at something the other day, and I'd shared it with you around effective field goal percentage, and it was looking at the effective field goal percentage of all the teams in the NBA, and you saw people who were on the plus side and teams who were on the minus side. Now, most of the teams on the plus side were playoff teams, and according to, I'm forgetting the person's name who put this stat out, they were saying the Golden State Warriors, because they sort of were in the middle of the teams on the plus side, they would be the most dangerous team to play in the playoffs. What did you make of that statistic? Because it still looks at the sample of 72 games, and as you said, it's against playing some lesser teams. So are the Golden State Warriors, due to their pretty good effective field goal percentage, are they truly dangerous in the play-in, and if they get into the playoffs?
They're definitely dangerous in the play-in, and they could be dangerous in the playoffs, right? So now here's where the stats and your eye test come to play, right? Okay, of course we know about Steph Curry, right? So who can go nuclear at any time. He goes nuclear, it may not matter what your team is doing because, hey, it's just, them's the breaks, right? This is the greatest shooter of all time. You're going to lose. But you have to also look at it contextually, right? Like why Golden State's been better lately is one, defensively they've played better over the last half of the season, and their role players around Steph are taking and making shots, right? See, the big thing is come playoff time, we know who your number one option is. So you're going to play Golden State. What's your mission? Stop Steph Curry, let the rest of them dudes beat you. Now, stopping Steph Curry, easier said than done, but that's your primary goal, right? Okay. But when you have guys who are not afraid to take and make shots now and hit them, that now forces your hand defensively. Yeah, you're still going to likely, in a possession that ends with Andrew Wiggins or Jordan Poole or Steph Curry, yeah, you're going to want Jordan Poole or Andrew Wiggins taking the three. However, those guys are shown that they're capable of taking and making shots now, right? And so when that happens, that now changes and forces you to make a move on defense. Now, in a series, right, the overall play of the Warriors and their overall talent, if they run into a team like the Lakers, but they wouldn't play the Lakers in the postseason, they're playing them in a play-in. If they played Utah or Phoenix, I think those teams' overall excellent play and the talent gap would, I think, make them likely to beat Golden State. But in a one-game scenario, and with the institutional knowledge that Steph Curry, Draymond Green have, and Steve Kerr, listen, those guys know, and they've been around enough. They can find ways to win. And if it gets late in the series and there's pressure, Golden State ain't going to be nervous, right? Steph and Draymond certainly won't be nervous. You, on the other hand, playoff neophyte, you might be nervous. And there is something that's measurable, that's something that we can't measure there, but that piece of it matters too.
Well, we look at some stats too, right? We look at the Clippers, who are the best jump shooting team in the NBA and have been really efficient in terms of their shooting, particularly from downtown this year. When that goes, is that a stat where you look and say, hey, this is good, this team has a lot of ways they can stretch the floor out and they can score? But then does it also concern you when you have to say, yeah, but what happens when the jump shot isn't falling? What do the numbers tell you with the Clippers?
The numbers tell me that the Clippers, the Brooklyn Nets, these are teams that are the tops in the league in effective field goal and true shooting percentage. But you have to look at how they get their shots and who are those players taking those shots, right? In the case of the Clippers, you have two of the elite wing creators in Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, right? You also have Ivica Zubac in the middle, who's getting layups and dunks at the rim, right? That's a large part of why those numbers are high. And because the attention that Kawhi and PG are drawing, you're getting threes and you're getting spacing from Serge Ibaka and other players like that. So I like their shot profile and shot makeup come postseason. In terms of will the jumper fall, the thing about Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, those are players who can also get themselves to the free throw line, right? And they can get easy baskets. You look at the Brooklyn Nets, I look at them also very similarly. They have maybe the three best one-on-one creators and shot makers in the NBA right now, all on one team. So I know that if something breaks down for that team, in every possession, they are likely going to get a good to great shot. And in the playoffs, again, when possessions are limited, you can't waste, right? Am I getting bad possessions? If James Harden's on the floor and those other two, you're not getting a bad shot. Now, they may miss the shot because you're not going to make every shot, but It ain't going to be a bad shot. Same with having a guy like Chris Paul. It's about every time down the floor, Phoenix is going to get a good shot. And that matters in the postseason.
No, absolutely. I guess the last thing for me before we wrap here is when you're looking at the postseason, Is it effective field goal percentage? Is it another stat? Is there one stat you say that you really like to look at when it comes to terms of predicting and looking at the outcomes, especially, and it's not a play-in scenario, because you mentioned that about a one-game scenario, but in terms of looking at a 7-game series, is there one stat that really matters to you above all that you might take in looking at the regular season and how it might translate to the playoffs?
There's no one stat, but what I will say, the stat that I like to key in on a lot is the on-court, off-court differential for individual players, right? And the one I go to a lot is the Utah Jazz and Rudy Gobert. When he's on the floor, the Jazz outscore opponents by almost 16 points per 100 possessions. When he's off the floor, they get outscored by 2. And that is such a telling stat to me. It's like, okay, so and then when I watch the Jazz, I know when Rudy is on the floor, they are a better team. There's this myth that goes on out there, Dexter, that in the playoffs, you play Rudy Gobert off the floor. Well, when you actually look, that's actually not true. That's a myth. He doesn't get played off the floor. But the idea that teams want to play him off the floor should tell you something, because they know if Rudy's on the floor, we have problems. We know we're not scoring at the rim. Rebounds are going to become less available, right? There's all these different ways in which he makes the game harder for us. Because again, as much as this is a 3-point shooting league, the points in the paint at the rim are still the most valuable shots in all of basketball. They're the easiest because they're the closest to the basket. When you have a 7'2" huge monster defensive player of the year, that makes that really difficult, right? And so I love looking at the on-court, off-court differential.
Yeah, it's hard to not look at those numbers and not see how impactful they are. What people are doing when they're on the court, what's happening for the team when they're off the court. It's hard to ignore those stats. Definitely. Gerard, another good NBA with nuance here. No hot takes.
No hot takes here, people. We here for the real nuance.
Like it. We love it.